Hey guys, welcome to this video on the create statement or command in TSQL. So in this video we're going to take a look at basically the two versions of the create statement or command. One of them is the create database command and the other is the create table command. And along with these two we'll inadvertently look at another command, which is the use command, and that would just be an add-on to learning these create commands. So we'll take a look at that later in the video. So now just taking a step back, just looking at the theory behind the create statement. So basically the create statement is a command from the DDL subset of SQL or TSQL queries. So in the previous videos we had looked at the different types of TSQL queries, and the first type we had looked at was the DDL or data definition language. So the create command comes under this data definition language, and the data definition language consists of basically SQL or TSQL commands that can be used to define the database schema. So it basically describes the database schema and can be used to create, modify and delete objects and structure of database and structures of database objects in the database itself. So these commands are not generally used by clients or end users of the product, but rather they are used by database administrators and the like. So let's jump into the demo then. So I've just opened SQL Server. If you haven't downloaded SQL Server and SQL Server Management Studio on your PC, you can check out my simple step-by-step video guides to the process for both Mac and Windows. I'll link them in the top right corner of your screen. And also, before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video in my channel, as it helps me to continue creating these videos. So let's begin with the create database command. So the create database command is basically a statement that is used to create a new SQL database inside the server on your PC or in the cloud, or however you are interacting with SQL Server. And its syntax is pretty simple. It's just create space database space the database name, and you can use a semicolon if you want, or otherwise you can just execute it alone without a semicolon. And something to make sure is that you have to have admin privileges before you are able to create any databases. And once you have created a database, you can confirm that you have created it by using the show databases command inside your SQL server. So let's begin with some code. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to open SQL server, which is on our laptop, and we're just going to look at the databases which are on the system. So we can see we've got the system databases and we've got the AdventureWorks sample database. And looking at the system databases, we've got master, model, MSDB, tempdb, which is just the default SQL server databases which come with your system. In a previous video we had looked at how to install this AdventureWorks backup database into your SQL server on your PC. So I'll link that video in the top right corner if you want to see it. We've done that again for Windows and Mac. So let's move ahead with the create database command. So let's just click new query here. And in the command, we can just fill in create space database space, I want to call mine new database test db. So we just write test db semicolon. Then we can select the entire command and click execute. So we get a message saying commands completed successfully with the time that it was completed at. And now if we want to see if it's been created successfully, we come over to our SQL Server instance, right click on it, click refresh, and open up databases again, and there we see test db, right? So test db has been created. So now as I had mentioned about the use database command, as you can see in this text box here, we are still our context is still residing in the master database. So what we want to do is we want to shift that to the test database that we had just created, and that's where the use database command comes in. So the use database command changes the database context to the specified database or to database snapshot in an SQL server, and its syntax is again just the word use space the database name that you had created. So what we can do now is just practice the command. So we write use space test db semicolon, and to execute just this part of the statement, because the previous part has already been executed, we select it and then click execute. And what you'll notice is in this text box in the bar above, that has changed from master to test db. That means the context of the current query has been moved from master, which it was defaulted at, that has now moved to test db, and we are using the test db database right now. Coming to the next part of the video, which is the create table command. So before we take a look at the create table command, we just want to maybe look at what is a database table. So a table is a collection of data organized in terms of rows and columns, and in dbms terms, tables are basically known as relations, and each row in a table is known as a tuple, right? So if we look at the database, which I've put in the slide for you, we've got a table named employee, which is the relation known as employee, and in that relation we've got three attributes or columns, which is the employee's name, his address, and his salary. And if we look at each row or tuple, we get the data about one entity in the table. So we know Ankit, and we know his address, and we know his salary. So data pertaining to one entity will reside in one row, and similar types of data will reside in columns, and these can be called attributes in some instances. So looking at how to create a table like that, we come to the create table command. So let's just look at the syntax. The create table command or statement is used to create a new table in the database. A little more complex syntax for this one, wherein we write create table, create space table name, and then we open a bracket, and then we list the column names we want, or attribute names, along with their data type. So let's just take a pause here and just talk about data types. So as we saw in the previous slide, the data in all data in the same column was of a similar format, right? So to optimize storage in database and inside the database, and to optimize querying data processing performance, we store similar types of data as similar data types. So we have a number of data types available to us in SQL Server or SQL in general. These can be character data types. So if you wanted to store names, addresses, and other textual data, we can store them as characters, or we have numeric data types like integers, floats, decimals. Then we have date times and other complex data types, which sort of cover any need that we would ever have. So I've just put some of the more complex data types as well in this slide. And coming back to the syntax, we specify the column name and its data type, then we put a comma, and then we can do the next column name and data type. So you do this as many times as you need to have columns. So if you needed 3 columns in a table like the one we saw, which was employee name, address, and salary, we would have 3 lines with a column name and a data type. So let's just jump into some code and see how to build a table ourselves. So again, like the syntax says, I'm gonna just before that the table that I'm looking to create is an ingredients table, wherein we have ingredients for a dish that we want to cook, and the ingredients have an ID, a name, and a price. So in this ingredients table, I want to store these 3 attributes of each ingredient that I'm going to use in my dish. So let's just create the table, which will hold an ID, a name, and a price. So let's begin. So we write create table. I'm going to call the table ingredients, and then we use an open bracket, and from there we can start with the ID. So I'm gonna call the ID attribute ingredient ID space, and the data type which I can store the ingredient ID in is an integer, so I'll write int because it doesn't need to have a decimal point, so I don't need a decimal data type. So an integer or a whole number should be just fine, so I'll use int there. And then we're going to store the name. So the name I'm going to call ingredient underscore name, and I'm going to store it in a var_char, which is a variable character, which is the standard data type that we use to store textual or string data. And then I'm going to put a number in a bracket. So this number represents the length, the maximum length that the ingredient name can be. This is just to optimize the storage of data. So in the memory, a space of 30 characters will be set aside just for this ingredient name. So we can't add ingredients name which would be longer than 30 characters into the table later on. That would cause an error, but 30 should be more than enough. There are other types where you don't have to specify the length of the text, and we'll look at that later on. So then after that we have the price, and I'm going to call it ingredient price. This I'm going to save it as an int as well. Normally this could be a decimal point, but just for simplicity's sake and for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to leave it int, and then we close the bracket and we put a semicolon, and then I'm just gonna select this create table statement and execute. So we can see that commands completed successfully with the completion time. And then just make sure we can refresh our SQL Server instance, open databases, open our testdb, and inside tables we can see that our dbo.ingredients has been created. Don't worry about the dbo dot right now. That's a slightly more advanced topic which we'll get to. But creating ingredients, this is just the way. So up next, just to show you that the table is working, I'm going to insert some ingredients into the table. We will be looking at the inserting data into a table in depth later on, but right now, just to show you that it works, I'm going to be inserting some data. So So I've just written a statement to insert some ingredients into the table that we created, and I'm just going to execute it now. Got a small typo. We put ingredient name twice where it's supposed to see. We put ingredient ID twice where it's supposed to be ingredient name. So we're just gonna execute again. And we can see that 6 rows have been added to the table. And now just to view that, we use something called the select statement again, which we'll be looking at in detail in a later video. And so we can see that we've built a table which contains all ingredient names. And yeah, so that's all for this video, which we went through the create command from the DDL subset of TSQL statements. We looked at the create database command, the use database command, and then the create table command. Thanks for watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video, as it helps us to continue making more video like this.